You are listening to I'll Follow You, a podcast about creative process and what really goes on behind the scenes of an artistic life. My name is Allison Felis, and I love talking to musicians, writers, visual artists, and other brilliant thinkers about their working methods, obsessions, and pet projects. Guess what? Just by tuning in, you're part of the inner circle now. Welcome back to I'll Follow You. Today, I am simply delighted to be in conversation with Jeanette Elaine Dubois. Jeanette is a member of the Motion Picture Editors Guild and has 25 years of experience cutting a wide variety of projects for film and television. She's worked on the Emmy Award-winning shows Super Soul Sessions with Oprah Winfrey and Artbound on PBS, as well as Emmy-nominated documentaries including The Day My God Died. Recently, she's worked for Steve Harvey's Steve on Watch and has just completed editing her second season of Married to Real Estate, starring Egypt Sherrod on HGTV and MAX. Elaine is also often called upon for voiceover work and has written, produced, directed, and edited her own short films as well. At the end of 2019, Jeanette self-published her first book, the memoir Things My Father Never Knew He Taught Me, 7 Lessons from a Life, which is available on Amazon now, and be on the lookout for the audiobook version to be released on Audible later in 2024. In today's chat, we thread the metaphysical through the practical as we discuss the energy of creativity, how what we do is an expression of who we are, the wisdom of her father's saying that some people are so spiritually minded that they're no earthly good, her conviction that our idea of a muse is really just a person's own higher spirit, the realities of the way changes in the entertainment industry are affecting people's livelihoods, the energetic responsibility inherent to creative work, and learning to let yourself speak and be heard. Be sure to check out the show notes on my blog, queenofpeaches.com, for links to Jeanette's book, to her Instagram profile, and more. And now, my conversation with Jeanette Elaine Dubois. So here I am with Jeanette Elaine Dubois, writer, editor, amazing all-around musician and human and lovely, lovely person. I'm so glad to have you on Zoom with me. Thank you for being here, Jeanette.
Thank you. This is such an honor to be part of your stable of people that you have. You have such a wide variety of wonderful creative people with so much to say, so many different kinds of ideas and thoughts. And I feel really honored to be part of that. It's very exciting for me.
Well,
So,
I'm
thank you.
excited to have you here because, yeah, I just feel like you are such a joyful, person to be around. And, we were just, talking and we were like, are we recording? Should we be recording? Because it's I just feel like we get along so well. And
Yeah.
you lead such a fascinating life and have such a fascinating perspective on life that, I really just wanted to, get deep into it with you. So before we do get deep into it, do you want to just say a little bit about yourself and sort of what you're up to these days and sort of all, just a little by way of intro, contextual
Well, let's
thing.
see.
Yeah.
Contextually, kind of a jack of all trades in some ways, but my main focus in my career in the last 20 years or so has been editing film and television. And I just recently got off an HGTV show called Married to Real Estate. So I've been editing that for 3 seasons, really 2.5. I came in on half the first season. And I'm, about to do some work for SAG-AFTRA, which I do every so often. So, just as an editor, I do a lot of different kinds of projects. It used to be that I would be contracted for years at a time, get a 3-year, 5-year contract. Now it's like, woo, I got 2 months worth of work, So it's changed, but I like the variety. So, and anyways, that's the main way that I produce my content in my life, I guess, or have a career. But I also am a writer, as we were talking about a little. I have written a book that's out there, and I'm trying to get some more out there. On the shows that I've worked on, I've also written scripts and things for them as needed. A lot of these reality shows in particular that I've worked on will need voiceover scripts and things. So yeah, those are the two main things I do. But what else? I like to, sing and dance. I don't really dance that well, but I love to garden. What else? I'm a human that's living in this earth and enjoying life as much as possible. I guess that's the big thing, right? Like what we do is just an expression of who we are, but who we are is so much more than those things, those little boxes that we put ourselves into. So that's a thing that I do, but I think right now, I think I'm in the process of changing to that career and my focus of my life again, which seems to be a 20-year cycle for me. Mm. Like every 20 years, oh, what are you doing now? I don't know. I think I'm going to go into writing full time. No, like now I'm going to go into this theater full time. I don't know. It's definitely been interesting to me. I think we all have cycles in our lives, and allowing yourself to flow with that cycle is really important, because if we get stuck in one way, it can cause us to be it can cause us to go into depression, it can cause us to resist what's happening. And so then it becomes really difficult to go through it. And I've done that. I understand it, especially if you're in something super secure. It can be really scary to get out of that secure space. But you kind of, it's one of these things of sink or swim. You kind of have to learn how to go with the flow and get your body moving with that stream and start moving your arms and your legs, and just movement is really what it's about. And that movement will help not just pull you forward, but it'll help release anything inside of yourself that is stuck, that doesn't need to be there. To go I can go on. This is my brain. So my brain is saying there's an example of that is right now I am experiencing sciatica. My back is hurting extremely badly. I get it every so often. All I was doing was the laundry. You turn and suddenly I have been walking and hiking and climbing trees and doing all the stuff to get myself energetically back into a certain shape and mindset, but mostly because I want to get physically healthy. I want to stay physically healthy. I like to go hiking. I like to take these big walks. I like to go camping with my husband. We're we both enjoy the outdoors a great deal. And I have always had a goal of being able to, when I'm like 100 years old, go out for a hike if I want to. That's my plan. I want to still be moving and doing even when I'm 100. So it's interesting that what happens with sciatica, which I've had a couple times, is it tweaks your body. But the only way, and I just talked with my doctor about it yesterday, the only way to heal it is through movement. It actually isn't something where you're supposed to stay still. You're actually supposed to, even though it hurts to walk, the walking, the movement, doing the yoga, doing the stretches is the thing that helps it to heal. It helps move that through your body. It helps get your muscles back into the shape they need to be. It helps the muscles around it to support the one that's been pulling at your spine. It's this whole thing. And movement is the best thing you can do to heal that pain. And so I found it really interesting for two things. One was that I felt like my body was saying, you're doing too much, slow down. Okay, so I allowed it to slow me down, but I also am allowing it to teach me how to move through the pain. And it is true that when I walk very slowly and with my little hiking pole, but as I walk, that I can feel that muscle releasing, and I come back from my walks, even though they're very slow, feeling much better, and today I felt better than I have in the last week. And the other part of it is remembering that the pain isn't here to stay, that I'm moving through it and I can get through it. And I know there are situations where people have pain that does stay in their lives. There are people with chronic pain that it will never go away. And there's other methods they have to do to learn how to manage that, you know, to be able to move through life anyways, despite the pain that will never go away. And that is a physical thing, but I've also known people who have that emotionally, people who have lost people that they have, you know, their child, or, and that's something that is a pain that will never heal completely. It's always going to exist. This heart, you know, their heart is always going to have this hole there, right? That's going to hurt. So then it's a matter of learning, though, how to retrain yourself to move through life still and find the ability to be in that balance, so that even if you have that pain, you still are able to enjoy your life. You're still able to be a space of balance of grief and joy in either hand. And that's how I've always seen it. Like, I learned that this last year because I'm going into deep subjects really fast here.
I want it. I want all of it. No, this is beautiful, because this is like, yeah, my first question that I had for you was, I mean, and you're sort of speaking to it in sort of an indirect way, was, but like when I sort of sat down to write notes about like, oh, what do I want to talk to Jeanette about? It's like the phrase that came to my mind was the energy of creativity. And I was like,
Yeah.
that is Jeanette in a nutshell. Like, for those of you who do
Oh,
not
wow.
have
I
the
love
pleasure of
that.
knowing her directly, and hopefully you will get to know her through this podcast today, but you just, it's because it's the energy in the spiritual sense, but it's also the energy in the physical sense, because I do think of you as being a very physically active and engaged person with, you know, the hiking that you do in California, and you did like an amazing pilgrimage, well, a couple of them in Europe. I
Yeah.
mean, you did one in the
Yeah.
Cotswolds and you did one in
Yeah.
Italy.
Yeah.
So just before we go deeper into any of those things, like, just
Mhm.
ground us a little bit in your background and in where this, you know, I guess it's kind of a fool's errand to ask, like, where does the spirituality come from? But where do you feel it? Like, where do you feel like it comes from in your life? And like, has it, I mean, I get the sense that it's always been there for you, but like, was there a point for you when you were younger, or at some point when you were like, this is how I want to choose to live my life? Because it seems like
Yeah.
you have a vision for how you want to live in the world, that no matter where it takes you. I mean, we were talking offline before about like
Yeah.
working in advertising and working in a bank
Yeah.
and having all these
Yeah.
different things. There does seem to be this coherence to the way that you live and you exist and you live creatively. So I don't know. Talk me through that,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It's really a multidimensional question because in some ways, yes, I was raised, you know, in a spiritual family, and if, as you read my book, my dad was a pastor, and so I was raised in religious beliefs systems. But I was also raised. My father was very, very beyond the religion. He was a spiritual person, and I differentiate between those two because in my mind most religions tend to be about the rules and laws surrounding the idea of spirituality,
Right.
and they tend to use your sense of soul and your sense of spirit to then explain, they try to explain it to you, and I understand that. But they also then, most religions in my perspective, use those rules to then try to control you through the thing that is the most important, which is your eternal self. And they threaten that sense of eternity within you with expulsion, basically, from eternity if you don't obey their set of rules and go into their mindset of the way the world should be. And so for me, I find most religions to be very exclusive and excluding others. And you have to be part of this team. And I find most religions to really basically, they all become, in my mind, when they're followed in that extreme way, a cult. You know, it becomes that cult like mindset of like, I have to think this way and nobody else is right except for this. And it's very narrow, right? Whereas true spirituality, and the people I know who are religious, like my father, who believed very strongly in his Christian faith, but also was very spiritual in that he was very expansive. in his love for everyone, and believing that everyone could come to God, and that he didn't have all the answers. He saw the Bible and Christianity as having the answers, but he also acknowledged that he wasn't God himself and couldn't have all the answers, therefore. And so he was very inclusive of other religions and other frames of thought. And I remember when I was a kid, one of his friends, from he was a teacher, and one of the other teachers coming over and talking about, they were talking religion, and he was a Hindu, and how he was, I'll just never forget how he felt so bad for us that we only had one God. He's like, you only have one you can go to? That's just so sad. Like if I can't get to this one, I try that guy. And then he's like, I have at least a dozen I talk to every day.
Oh,
like
that's
for him,
amazing.
he thought it was so limiting.
Oh, that's
And
amazing.
it
love
was
that.
one of my first experiences of going, wow, there's another way of thinking about all this. But also for me, when I was little, I had my own personal experiences spiritually that were outside of the religious context. I would be walking, and some of my earliest memories are just being out in nature and having this sense of something beyond me, of having a sense of God, for lack of a better term, because it was definitely a presence and a being that I sensed. There's nothing but love. And so I always had this connection to that. And I always felt like it's just there. It's just part of all of us. And it wasn't because of my training from my father so much as I experienced it for myself inside, and seeing seeing that energy of love and energy of life, that source in everything around me. I could see it in the beams of light. And I just really had that. I also had certain experiences, that I talk about in my book, about like seeing my grandpa after he passed. And that let me know that there is something beyond this physical body, so there was that aspect of things. And yet, the reason I say it's a multidimensional question is that despite all of these things that I had in my past and growing up, I think that the choice is every day, that you have to make that choice every day about whether or not you're going to believe, or you're going to receive this, or you're going to be in that space. Because I certainly have gone through many periods in my life where I'm just like, I reject all of it. It must all be in my mind. I totally imagined everything.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm thinking, and it's funny. And I don't think that's a bad thing to do. I think that it's a good thing for each of us to question that inside of ourselves, and allow ourselves to have that scientific questioning mind. I personally believe science and spirit go hand in hand. But I think that it's, my dad used to have a phrase for people who would get into their spiritual sense so much that they would leave their common sense behind, as it were, right? And they were so spiritually minded that they're no earthly good.
Nice.
It was like, because they're just not here. They're not, being real and being practical and whatever. But, there's the opposite of that, of course, as well, where you're so into just, no, there's nothing here except for this physical reality, and ignoring it, that you are kind of cutting off a part of yourself and the energy of everything around you, I feel. But I also don't want to put that out there that people who are that way are wrong either, because that's their life. That's their journey of where they're at. And maybe they are right, and this is all there is. But, I kind of don't care, because of being in a space of connecting to spirit, what I call the spiritual realities, or the multidimensional realities. If that makes me happy and puts me in a good place in my life and makes me a better person, making better choices, choosing to be good to this world, choosing to make choices that is kind and about compassion and about love, then why not? What's wrong with that? I don't understand people who have a problem with people who are religious or spiritual that are also being and doing their best in their lives. I understand it if that person is trying to force and coerce others into their way of belief. But when people have issues with people simply because they believe something and have to make fun of that or try to denigrate them, to me, I'm like, why? Why are you so overly sensitive about this that you have to be? What part of your masculinity or femininity is this like threatening to you that I believe this way and think this way? Like, what part of your humanity does this threaten? Why do you have to feel like you have to force me into your way of thinking? Now you're being just as bad as those people you accuse of their religious beliefs of being so bad, right? So it's like, really what it's about is being accepting of each other. Anyways, the multidimensional question of my spirituality comes to, yes, I did experience it when I was a kid, but I continue to this day to every day wake up going, is this real for me?
Right.
I think it's important to be able to connect from where you're really at in that moment. Because if we can't be honest with ourselves on that level, how are we going to be honest with ourselves on anything else in our lives? And that's what I've discovered. I definitely had periods of life where I hid from myself, as it were, right? Because I was trying to please everybody around me and be something that everybody else wanted me to be, which we talked about a little bit before the, pre-podcast here. And I know how that feels to be that person, and I still can feel myself, it's there in me still, that desire to please, the desire to, I don't know, be something in this world that the world will accept, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In my brain, whatever that is.
Right.
And I keep having to go back to reminding myself, my cat just came out and is looking at me here, of how, like, when we look at our cats, for instance, or the trees or anything that exists, we have no expectations of it to be anything other than simply what it is. And yet we're not that way with ourselves. And why is that? Why do we judge ourselves so deeply? And personally, I think a lot of it comes from cultural conditioning. I think it comes from religious conditioning. Most of the major religions in the world tell their people that they aren't good enough. And the reason that's put out there is because that way now we can give you all the rules that you need to follow in order to become good enough, right? Which falls under our jurisdiction of power and control. So, and it's amazing how you look at, to me, the people in this world who are the most powerful and beautiful, the most just have the most influence. They are ones who have that beautiful, calm confidence and just are who they are. And they don't care. And not in a narcissistic way, because you don't want to go that direction. There's always that balance, right? So for every great quality, there's the opposite of it that has those same, it seems to inhabit the same ideas, and yet it's the darkness of it. And that's just part of the balance of life again. And I don't want to put those people down either, because if we continue to demonize people who are narcissistic or have these other issues, they're never going to get over it. It just feeds into that narcissism. It feeds into whatever their wounding is that causes them to be that way. So the only way for us to really become truly, I think, balanced in ourselves and calm and confident in ourselves is by really accepting who we are as we are in this moment. So, did I answer your question?
No, that's amazing. It's beautiful. And so like as the sort of like flip side to that, sort of, taking it from the spiritual to the practical. I mean, again, you've worn all these different hats in your life. And so like, is there a way that your spirituality connects to all these creative expressions that I associate you with, whether it's the writing or the editing or the music. Like,
Mhm.
is that like a conscious connection that you make? Is that something that
Yeah.
you sort of with this sort of spiritual understanding, you said like, I want to live my life creatively? Like, how does
Yeah.
what's that interplay for you?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah. So I think that it definitely informs everything I do creatively, whether I consciously understand or acknowledge it or not. I think that's true for all of us. I do know that in the past, I didn't consciously seek out anything spiritual per se, and we talked about that. Like I thought I had to, I was a vocal performance major, got my degree in that, and then went and got jobs in corporate America because I thought that's what I had to do to have a real career, right? And then I was completely unhappy and made choices in my life that ended up, at the time I could say, oh, wow, that I wish I hadn't done it that way. But I'm also grateful for the fact that I allowed myself to go through that process because at the time, that's where I was. And by going through my ex, for instance, getting married the first time and experiencing that relationship, or going through those jobs that I really ended up hating, it helped show me who I really am now, right? It helps peel away the layers. The alarms had to go off inside of me to get me out, to break me out of that cycle of thinking in terms of the way I was raised, in terms of the religion. And part of the way the alarms went off was by making the choices that took me into a space that wasn't really me, right? Getting into a marriage that I wasn't really happy with, but I did because that's what my parents wanted and I was supposed to do. I graduated college, now I got married. That's what you did. I mean, it was a whole thing. And taking a job that I hated because that's what you did. You just got into some kind of a job that was really secure and had like long-term benefits. And so it was interesting because I helped create in myself that, by making those choices, it created the pressure inside of me that ultimately something had to give because that wasn't who I really was. And when that all kind of broke open, which I talk about in my book, that year of Job, as I called it, and everything kind of came apart, I'm actually really grateful for that because that was for me. I broke through those walls and I felt like I was breathing again and the sunlight was around me and I was able to think for myself again and come to a connection with spirit on my own terms again, connection with
Mhm.
God on my own terms, and not my own terms so much as what was true for me. Like I could feel that connection so much deeper than when I was trying to shove myself into that box that I'd been raised in to believe was the only way to do it. And all of a sudden, once I broke through that, it was scary because I didn't have all the answers now, right?
Mm.
Which is part of what religion gives you, is all the answers. Well, now, I don't know. Maybe some of that is true, but maybe some of it isn't. You don't have any answers, and it can be very scary. But it also is incredibly freeing, and it's when you start to breathe. So, in terms of creativity and spirituality, no, for a long time, I did not consciously look for uh, spirituality within my creativity. I was just doing the creativity to be creative, which most people do because it's just an expression of your soul. When you need to sing, you need to perform, or you need to write. It's just part of who you are. And to me, that is a spiritual outpouring, even though the person doesn't know it. They talk about being in the muse, right? Oh, I have the muse on me right now, and I'm allowing the muse to flow through. And I'm thinking what you're doing is you're actually connecting to your higher self. You're connecting to your spirit. You're connecting to that eternal sense of yourself that is out there that has all of this amazing ability. Like it's literally touching into the point of all creation, to that magical place of all possibilities. And that's where you're connecting to, and it's coming through you now, right? And it's allowing, it's flowing through. but not everybody, most creatives don't think of that as a spiritual thing. I think it just naturally is a spiritual thing. I think that naturally that spirit is coming through, even if people don't realize that's what's happening. But that's why then audiences then respond, especially to performers around them, because they're responding to that person, connecting to that spirit. They're connecting to their true self, and that comes through, and people respond to that very positively, whatever that is, even if it's just you having a conversation with someone like this, right? If somebody's being real, people hear it and they respond to it, and they connect to that reality. You don't have to be famous or wealthy for that to happen. It doesn't have to be like your career is huge and successful. You can just be who you are, have your beautiful little life, such as it is, and be connecting to people on that level every day.
Right.
Just by being who you are. But more recently, once I really started to explore this aspect of myself more as an adult, in more recent years, in the past decade or so, really started exploring and asking questions of myself. And after my dad's death, I started writing that book, and it really started getting things out. And I was working on a lot of shows at that point. I was very busy with my editing career, but I was realizing they weren't really fulfilling me. And they were paying, I bought my condo, and, they're paying my mortgage, and they were like I seemed very successful in my career, and I was, but it wasn't as fulfilling as I thought it was going to be. And I realized it's because I really wanted to put things out there that meant something to the world and meant something to me. And so it's been more recently that's when I started to write the book, because that was a meaningful thing. But even creatively with my editing, that I started to work on like music videos for my friends who are musicians. Because, as you know, my husband's a musician, and we have many friends who are musicians. And you and I have in common musician friends, and Brian. But I started to do things for myself that made me feel good, that I was helping other people and doing things and then I also was able to work for a time. It was a website called insidewink.com that I was part of starting and creating with my friends Allison Martin and Jean Trebek, and they still have their Inside Wink webcast that they do, or podcast, I should say. And they interview people and do a podcast now through Inside Wink. The website is still up, but they stopped putting content on the website. But for a while, they had a magazine website up that I was then doing video content of their interviews with people. And I loved that, because one of the things that was fulfilling in me was doing content that was meaningful, was editing things that were meaningful, and putting out these interviews with people like Lee Harris and with Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor, and just like, what's Neil, the guy that does the tapping method, like all these interesting people. That was like, wow, like these different interesting interviews. And I really enjoyed that a lot. And then I've been able to do some other things. I did a web series about mental health, about a woman whose sister was going through things. And we did this documentary series. So I've been able to do these things that have been more fulfilling to my soul. Ironically, they don't pay much, but
right.
Which is so often the case, right?
Well, because that was going to be one of my questions for you, is like in that battle between sort of like creative expression and like making a living, it's like where are you with that these days? Like how do you feel like you tried to resolve that, or do you sort of feel like that's the sort of like devil's bargain of living in LA, where like the industry just wants to like suck that creativity dry out of you just to exploit it? Like
it is definitely a devil's bargain of living in LA, and there definitely is it's a hard balance to take, for sure. And I would say like I said, I just did an HGTV show, which was fun. And mostly it's fun because the people that I work with are just great. And it's a great team of people on that show. And it's fun to put out that kind of content, that's light-hearted. I mean, to me, that is still a benefit to the world, because what we're putting out, yeah, it's a design show. It's about designing things, but there's a lot of people for whom those shows mean a lot. And one of the things I like about this show in particular is because the stars of the show, for lack of a better term, Egypt Sherrod and her husband Mike, are persons of color. They're African American. And you don't have a lot of that representation on a lot of these shows. And so it makes me feel really good to be putting out subject matter that's also representing groups of people that don't have a lot of representation in certain areas, especially. And so I'm like, yeah, this is cool. It's cool to, so even though that's really kind of the bill paying show, it also does satisfy quite a few of my requirements, I guess it is, in terms of feeling like I'm putting out content that is meaningful to the world. And they often have really good things to say on the show as well, the two of them. They are people of faith themselves, and they have their family, and they try to put out positive messaging too. So it's a good, it makes me feel good to do that. But to your point, the other aspect of that is, yeah, this industry is really hard, and it used to be where you would be contracted, as I said, for a year to 3 years to 5 years on a show, and you could count on that. And now you can't. And so it's made it even harder to continue the craft when you are like, gosh, I hope I get 6 months of work this year. And
Right.
maybe I can stretch that out to cover all my bills for the remaining 6 months. And it is something that's part of why I'm sitting here considering, okay, what else can I be doing with my life? What other things should I be putting out? Yeah, so I'm kind of in a crossroads with that, because it isn't quite the successful career I'd hoped it would become in that aspect. But it isn't just me. I mean, all of my friends are going through this, because the whole industry is changing so much. And to your point, when I have been on shows where I've been like, can't wait to get out of the edit bay at the end of the day. I'm just, oh man, I called them my slam bam thank you ma'am shows. It was just like cut, edit, and it's done. Okay, I'm out. Like,
Yeah.
nobody really cares about the content. It was just stuff to get out there and throw out on the airwaves, and it helped pay for my mortgage. That was it.
Yeah.
And we do that. We unfortunately have to do that.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like, if you think about it, I mean, sometimes we have to do those things that we don't like to do in life in order to support ourselves and the people around us.
Yeah.
And that's just part of life too. And as much as I would love it to be something, and I think we can get to that point of life being something where what you do every day flows into who you are and what you love. I mean, we've seen people who have been able to successfully make that happen and be in a space in their lives where they're like, I'm doing something I love, I'm making great money at it, I have a wonderful life, and things are good. And I've seen that, and I see that people can have that. But I feel like we are kind of being sold a little bit of a bill of goods, believing that that's the case for every single person on earth. The reality is there are many life situations that we will have come across us that causes us to have to make a choice, where we are having to do something that we're not happy to do, that we don't really want to do, but we have to do. For instance, besides, oh, now I have to get a job so I can pay my mortgage and put food on my table and take care of my kids. And I hate this job, but at least I'm caring for myself and my family. And we have a home and a roof over our heads. Sometimes it's that, but sometimes it's, okay, I have my elderly parent getting sick and they need care, and either I'm going to have to sacrifice financially, or even I'm going to have to sacrifice my time and energy and take them into my home and take care of them. right?
I just read
There's
this really
different
devastating
kinds.
essay, like by a woman. I'll link it in the show notes, because I'm blanking on her name off the top of my head. But she talked about how, her mother was very abusive to the family growing up,
Mm.
and after her father died and mother was alone in the house and her brothers were like, we took care of dad, you're gonna have to
Yeah.
take this one for the team and take care of mom. This woman,
Oh
she
man.
she figured out, she was like, the way she pitched it to herself was, I'm going to think of this as a writer's retreat. Like, she was a writer. And so she
Yeah.
was like, I'm
Yeah.
going to depersonalize this as much as I can, like the abuse that I'm going to sustain from
Yeah.
my mother, so that
Yeah.
I can have free room and board, so that I can then have the evenings after she goes to bed to work on my craft, and like,
Wow.
what a strong creative decision to be like,
Wow.
I'm going to take this and turn
Yes.
something magical out of it. Yeah.
Yes. And that's exactly where I was going to go with this. Because one of the things that going through the times of working at the jobs that I didn't like, one of the things that I learned from that, for instance, one of them had a long commute. And I got so annoyed with that commute. It would take me an hour every day at least. I mean, it's LA, right? So I can't, oh my God. Not only do I hate my job, but this traffic on top of it every day, both directions, causing me to have 2 extra hours or more added onto my day. I was just, all about it. Oh, so upset. So that's when I started to do the thing of that time was, cassette recorders,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I got a cassette tape that was, it was initially Esther Hicks, right? The Abraham Hicks, and started listening to those as I was going to work. And that's what got me into the idea of doing listening, simply listening to meditative things and other things. This is pre people having, the ability to put their iPhones in, because there were no iPhones, you know. So, but I will never forget how that changed my perspective. And I
Mm.
talk about that in the book, how it changed my perspective on simply the drive there. So that by the time I got to work, and this was pre the editing one that I talk about in my book, I was working at that time for Pfizer Corporation as an assistant, right?
Mm.
Which it was totally out of the wheelhouse of anything creative. I'm working for, a chemical company or a drug company, doing PowerPoint presentations. It was like so uncreative. But listening to those tapes as I went just changed me and helped me get into that zone of being much more calm when I got there. And they were teaching me at that point. I was able to learn so much because I was listening to so much of the Abraham Hicks stuff, as well as some other things. I think I had some Seth tapes, and that's part of it. It was part of what helped spur me into my spiritual journey.
Yeah.
And so here I had this wonderful moment, and it made me realize, rather than looking at that hour of time as a waste, it was giving me the opportunity to spend 2 hours of my day every day listening to something that was really nourishing to my soul.
Yeah.
And it kind of helped change my perspective on that. And so that's now when I look at things, and I'm sitting here going, okay, what can I do next? What am I going to be doing next? And just like last year, I went and was at a point where I was going, okay, I'm gonna apply for some jobs as like a barista at the local coffee shop because I was desperately needing to work. And I did, and they turned me down, by the
Oh
way.
no. Oh no.
Which was my way of going, okay, universe, what the? But I also laughed about it because I'm just like, the universe is telling me, no, you don't need that job.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I was willing. And for me, it was changing it in my mind rather than going, oh, I have to get a job in a coffee shop. What else am I going to do? It was more like, I think this would be an interesting adventure. And to your point, like a writer's retreat, like, oh, how nice would it be to just work someplace where I have no responsibilities other than maybe the cash machine? Like, I
Right.
just have to make sure they get the right coffee or the right bun or whatever. I mean, like, to me, it was kind of like this, oh, I could look at this lifting of responsibility off of me, because all of my creative jobs, there's so much responsibility to it. I'm having to really put everything into it. And creatively be there and energetically be there. And time wise, most of the editing gigs, you're talking 10-hour days of working at least, if not longer. So, you know, it's very draining. And I was like, well, this could be cool.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
I
yeah,
just
yeah.
go in for like 6 to 8 hours a day and that's it. And I have no responsibilities after that. Like I leave and I leave, I'm done. So it was a whole different way of thinking of what if I did something, yeah, that is back into the regular working world instead of looking at it as backtracking. Could this be a different kind of new adventure? And would I be okay with that? You know, but that being said, I will tell you that one of the big things I learned about working in the corporate world and in offices is that I can't do that again.
Yeah.
And that was the good lesson for
Yeah.
me. I know that that's not anything I ever want to apply for because it's not me,
Yeah.
you know? So,
So tell me more then about like, so when you are in those like hellish long hours in the edit bay and you're
mm,
really pouring your creativity, what do you do in your life to refuel then? Like what does really like feed, fuel your tank back up so that you're ready to go
mhm,
back in and give so much more of yourself? Cause like I, yeah, have experienced
mhm,
very similar, like especially when I'm in a hardcore like editing project and it's like, yeah, it's creative. It's the what you pour yourself
right,
into with it, the love that you bring to it, yeah, can be depleting. I mean, it's a satisfying depletion, but then yeah, how do you find ways to like bring yourself
yeah.
back up to like where you're feeling ready to give again?
Um, well, it depends on the job, you know. So when I'm doing a show where I'm working the 5 day week and I have to get, for me, it's in the evenings I put away, especially now because since COVID, uh, almost all editors, all the editing we've been doing has been from home. There's
Mm,
some of my friends that I know have gone into studio. I went into studio once
mm,
since then, but the studios have discovered just how much they love the fact that we can now log in and do everything remotely,
yeah.
because they don't have to pay for edit bays
Yep.
anymore, right?
Yep.
They don't have to pay for coffee. They don't have to pay for
Yeah, they don't
toilet
have to
paper.
clean the
Like
bathrooms. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
it's like all they pay for is one room with 12 avids and an IT guy that comes in once a week to make sure they're running. So they're happy. So they're like, yes, we want you to work from home. So most of the studios I work with have me working from home, which is nice because it's been a challenge in that learning to step away from my computer when I'm done at the end of the day and actually turn it off. That's the big thing, is turning it off, because otherwise I'll go back and I'll futz with things
Mm.
even after hours. It's like I'm not
Yeah.
act and my husband will be like, you're done. I'm like, I know, but I just have this one little thing. I just want to watch it down to make sure it's okay.
Oh,
He's like,
you're singing my song here because I this is exactly what happens with me and my husband. Yeah, he's like, "Why are you still at your desk?" I'm like, "I'm just finishing one last thing."
one little thing. And he's like, should I start dinner then or should I wait for another hour? Like, you know? But that's helpful, is when he
Oh, we
comes
love
home
these
and we have
guys who
dinner
help us
together. It
enforce our
helps.
boundaries. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like, stop. So that's one of the keys, is enforcing those boundaries.
Yeah.
If you're working from home, shutting it down, closing the door to your office if you have one. I have to unfortunately work in my den because we don't have two, office spaces here. And so that's been a challenge because it's not, I can't even close the door. So, it's like, okay, well, at least turn the computer off so then I'm not looking at it and I'm not tempted to go back on and take a look at things. And then stepping away from it. One of the things that I find most helpful is even breaking away from it by just going for a walk.
Yeah.
That's where the walking comes in for me. Let's get outside. Let's go for a short, even if it's just for 20 minutes, just get out away from what I was just doing and into nature. And I think that's the big part of it, breathing the air, looking at the trees, seeing something different besides your computer, and just, oh, okay, I'm outside, I'm here. And allowing your body to move and the whole thing reset helps you reset. For me, it's a big reset. When I used to work in the studios, one of the ways that I would get through the really long days is I'd always make sure to take my lunch, which it can be hard to do because you want to work through lunch and get that thing done and hit the deadline. But I found that it I was at my best if I made myself take the lunch. And I went through when I went through breast cancer is what really helped me do this, because I had to go out walking while I was dealing with all of that. The doctor was like, you need to walk every day.
Mm,
You need to get your body moving every day to process the radiation I was going through
wow.
and all that. And so it became a really good habit for me, taking an hour-long walk. What I found was that it reset not just my body, but my mind. So I would come back to my edit bay refreshed and ready to finish out the rest of that edit day.
Wow.
And then I'd go home and I'd sleep and cry and whatever, you know, break down.
Yeah.
Uh, but that's a lot of it too. Another thing is that allowing myself, when I am really tired, when I don't, it's like all I want to do is go read a book on the couch, letting myself go read a book on the couch. Okay, that's what I'm going to do tonight to reset myself. And then I'm going to go to bed. And it just kind of letting yourself have that rest, if that's really what your body and mind are needing, is really important as well. And it's something I've had to learn, because I tend to push myself. As I don't know if you guessed that yet.
Well,
Like,
but
I'm
it's
gonna go
also the
walking
world
anyways.
it's also the world we live in, though, right? Is like
Yeah.
hustle culture is prized. And again, I'm sure you're
Yeah.
surrounded by it, in your
Oh
industry,
yeah,
as
here in
far as
LA.
like work as hard as
Hmm.
possible, as much as possible,
Hmm.
get ahead, do whatever you can to gain the advantage. And
Yep.
yeah, it's just the
Yeah.
messaging that we all just swallow.
Big messaging here. And it's really hard. I was really hoping that COVID, it did change in that it allowed us to work from home as editors more, which is wonderful, because it does allow us to have, I'll take my breaks now here and go for a walk or whatever. But there still is that pressure. There still is that pressure of like, well, we got to get this done. You still feel that like, oh, I better be logged in and working, or they're going to think I'm a slacker. And like, especially because they can't see you in the edit bay now. So
Right.
now you have this pressure of like, I've got to prove that I'm really working to them, and they need to see that I'm logged in and I'm doing stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, but you still get to have a lunch even though you're working from home.
Yeah.
That's still part of the agreement,
Yeah.
that's and you still get to like end your day at the end of the day, and you still get to have breaks. You can get up from your desk and actually go use the bathroom. It's okay. It's like, I have to tell myself these things, because we do still get caught up in that. And there is that pressure, especially in entertainment, because so many people want to be in it, right?
Right.
They
Right.
love the idea of being in entertainment. But I don't think a lot of people realize how much of a business it is.
Yeah.
And it is just like any other business. There is a lot of pressure from the top to make cutbacks and make money, and they cut back on the people at the bottom, which puts more pressure on them to do more stuff in less amount of time.
Hmm.
It can be a really cutthroat kind of a business. But there's a lot of people in it who are also pushing against that,
Good.
especially now, especially since COVID.
Good.
There have been many people coming, and that's part of what these writers' strikes have been about. Hopefully we won't be striking, but I'm in IATSE. I'm a member of of the Editors Guild, and our contract's coming up in a few months, and we're crossing our fingers that they will actually give us a raise after 10 years, because we haven't had one for over a decade. But, no cost of living or anything, but it would be nice if we got that. But we're also not holding our breath for it, because we know what's going on with these corporations who now own most of the studios. They're
Right.
mostly owned by foreign investors and corporations that really are about the bottom line and not about the creative process. So it's been a hard thing to see, because I do feel like there has been a loss in my industry in terms of true creativity, because that is in large part because so much of the industry has gotten taken over by these big corporations that are run by people who are not creative and don't care about the creative aspect of it. They just want more money, not recognizing that it's the creativity that creates the money.
Yep.
It's I saw this. I don't know if you posted it, but somebody posted on Facebook a quote from someone who had said, "Is I don't know which movie this was, but it was or TV show, but it was a guy who was a musician talking to this corporate guy, saying, when the end of the world happens and we're both on a street corner, I'll be playing my music and they'll be passing you by with your hat out."
No.
Because because basically, and I totally am misquoting it, but the idea being, who are they going to want to see
Right.
when there's nothing else happening? They're going to
Yeah.
want to listen to my music. They're not going to care that you were once the president of some company. They're going to be like, well, yeah, but can you like plant a garden?
Right.
Like, what is really going to be needed in the world? But more importantly, yes, the things that are successful tend to be the things that have been the most uniquely creative.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not universally true, but really, it's really interesting that they're always chasing the dragon, as it were. They're always chasing that. Oh, this was successful, so we got to copy it exactly.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, the reason it was so successful is because it was different at the time.
Because it came from someone's soul, and
right,
yeah.
it came from something, and that's why so many times, like the second movie or the second season of a show or whatever is not as good
Yeah.
as it was the first time, because now they're trying to recraft it. Oh, now they pull in all these they pull out the writers and the creators that did the original. Oh, we're paying them too much, let's get somebody else in for cheaper. And then they try to like reproduce what was already there, and you're like, no, you're missing the point. Like, you need the people who initially created this to continue to do that creating. That's what makes it so crazy and original and good. And so it is disheartening, I mean, to see that, because I'm certainly nobody in the industry that can make a change, other than I can only make it for myself personally in my own life, and find those things that make my heart happy to do, and then try to do them. And there's so many, ideas in my brain, and I wish I could get more of them out, into the world.
Well,
And
one
I
of the
often,
things that you
yeah.
got out of your brain and into the world was your beautiful book that I totally
Oh,
want to
thank
talk
you.
about, as far as like in the midst of
Mm,
all of these long hours that you're working,
mm,
how did
mm.
you how did you get a book out that you self-published? Because that's a major accomplishment
It
to
was pretty.
yeah, so tell me about things my
Oh,
father never knew he taught me.
things my father never knew he taught me, and that came out because I started writing the book after he passed. I actually started it just before he passed,
Mm,
but then I really got into the meat of it after he passed, I initially started it just from my journals,
mm,
writing about. I wanted to kind of I'd written him wanting to kind of get his stories from his life so I could hold on to them when he was gone.
mm.
And I got some of those, but also that's when I started writing, what other wisdom did he give me? What other lessons did I learn? And I really started realizing it wasn't just the things that he told me, but the example of his life and the things that happened between us in a relationship that maybe weren't perfect or good, right? But they taught me something. So then it came up with, I kind of condensed them into these 7 lessons. And I just, it was my way of honoring him, but also honoring, who he was to me. And I'm sure some of my siblings have read the book and have loved it. Some have just not read the book at all, because I'm sure, feel their version of my dad is completely different than mine, which is true if you think about it, because I was the youngest of 7.
Oh, wow.
And so what I experienced with my parents, especially because I was also completely unplanned, I was a big surprise child. I don't know if I said it in my book, but my dad used to joke when I was a kid. He said, yeah, if you were a boy, I was going to call you Mac, for middle-aged carelessness. It's completely a surprise. I'm like, yeah, but but at the same time, he once wrote me in a letter, you may have not been a planned child and one that came to us unexpectedly, but you're one that I'm really glad we didn't miss. You
Mm.
know,
That's
And
beautiful.
so he was that kind of man. He had the sense of humor, but he had a lot of love for us. But I also know my oldest sisters and my oldest brother's experiences with my parents, his parents, was very different from mine.
Sure.
So I don't begrudge in the idea that they'll read this book and go, that wasn't the dad I knew. Well,
Right, right.
yeah, you're right. It wasn't the dad you knew. He changed by the time I came along. He'd had experience raising these other kids. And, you know, it was that whole youngest child syndrome. Oh, you were so spoiled. No, I think they were just tired.
Yeah. They
They were
knew
just
when
like,
to just like not
yeah,
fight it. Yeah.
we don't want to deal with this anymore. Okay, yes, exactly. It's like, she'll survive it. We're not going to sit here and like worry over that anymore. So, yeah, I ended up writing that book slowly as I was kind of purging my own emotions about my dad and kind of examining um, that and realizing that I wanted to just really leave behind some of those lessons that he had taught me. And that was something I wrote in one of my journals. It was like, I'm writing about all these things that my dad will never know he taught me,
Yeah.
and that's where the title came in, and then 7 lessons from a life. And I really wanted to, at the end there, to share. I kind of set it up to be kind of from my childhood to his death,
Mm.
so a little story arc of his life, as it were, as I knew it. And at the end, to also really share those parts of my journal and be vulnerable with that, because I felt like, I don't know, just that there was a lot in there that happened and that he said, and it just was so profound to me that I couldn't think of any other way to share it except from my journals,
Yeah. Yeah.
because it was like that was the reality. And I don't know, he really had a lot of good to teach. And he loved people, and I think he would have loved to have had these stories out there, this just inspiration to live life. I think that's the biggest thing about him, was how he loved being alive to the very, very end.
Mm.
How much he loved being, even though his religion and his faith and his belief was that he really was meant to go on from this life, right? That this is just a transitionary period. And the real life is once we pass from this and we leave our bodies. And now he's truly alive in spirit. He's now with the Lord. He's now with God, as he would say. And that he was going into the true living at that point, going into heaven and all that, which is what we all want to do, right? And yet he also had this huge way of for him, it was like our responsibility to enjoy the life we were given,
Mm.
because we were given it. It was a gift to us. It's something that we were meant to live abundantly and as well as we can. Our little lives are very powerful.
Yeah.
We don't have to be famous and wealthy to be powerful and make a huge difference. And I think that's the thing my dad's life really taught me the most. As we grow up into adults, there comes a point where I think almost all of us, it's, I think, very rare to have that person who always holds on to that. Even as they get older, they have to rediscover it at some point. And why is that? What is it about our culture, our lives, that causes us to lose that sense of wonder about the world? And we get a
Well,
little
I'm
jaded.
so glad that, you know, I was able to talk to you about all of these things, because I feel like you are such a guiding light for reminding us just of those simple joys, whether it's, yeah, going out and taking a walk, sitting with your kitties, having a nice cup of tea. So for
Yeah.
people who want like an infusion of the beautiful Jeanette energy in their lives,
Well,
social
thank you.
media, yeah, like Instagram, like is there a place where people
Um,
can follow you and
yeah.
get more of your
Um,
tidbits?
I am on Instagram. It's Gen Xer. So it's JEND, like Jeanette Dubois, Gen D, and then GENXER. So
I
Gen
will
D Gen Xer
put it in the show notes
is my
too for people.
Instagram handle. I am on Facebook. It's really just my private Facebook account. I don't really have a public one yet, but certainly you can look for me there. But I would say the Instagram is probably better. I'm not a big social media person, which I suppose I should be more of. I want to promote myself, but that is, I do like to post about my travels. I try to post about, positive things. For me, that's a big part of it. Is
Well, I
really
think
putting out the positive.
you're a beautiful user of social media as far as like whenever I see your posts, I always like get excited because I'm like, oh, Jeanette has
Oh,
such a beautiful like
thank
perspective on the
you.
world. And I get excited to see like
Oh,
what you're going to
thank
share about
you.
whether it's, photos of the natural places in the world that you're traveling or that you live near. And
Yeah.
so, you just bring like an unending
Yeah.
font of delight. I feel like whenever I see
Oh, thank
your
you.
posts and just your
Thank you.
general way of looking at the world, which is so why I was excited to connect with you here today and hear all of your stories. Thank you for sharing all of this wisdom with my listeners. And so hopefully
Yeah.
everyone will be inspired to go find their big thing or their little thing that is going to bring joy on the next little section of their path that they're walking.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for this whole time. I really appreciate it.
The most fun. I'm so grateful to you for your
Oh,
time and for all of your joy that you're able to share with us.
absolutely. I so appreciate it. And what we said before we started recording, I just wanted to say that also I'm really grateful that you ask, people like me. I mean, it's we all have a voice, right? And I was, like I said to you, I was looking at the people you've interviewed going, who am I? Like, well, she wants to interview me. And then I'm thinking, yeah, you know what? You have a voice too. And so I would encourage anybody out there who doesn't think that their voice matters. It does. It doesn't matter what your life is, what you do, who you are. The reality is your story is important and other people want to hear it. They do. So let yourself speak and let yourself be interviewed and let yourself have these moments, because you never know who you're going to touch, but more importantly, it touches you. It makes me feel great that you asked me. So I think, anyways, maybe I can end on that.
That's a beautiful, inspiring way. So everyone, use your voices, everyone. You heard it here.
Exactly. It makes everybody feel better.
Thank you so much, Jeanette. Thanks again for listening to this episode of I'll Follow You. Don't forget that you can always find show notes over on my website, queenofpeaches.com. Links to and for previous episodes are listed there as well. While you're there, I hope you might find another episode that strikes your fancy. All my recordings are assembled in my home studio using the free open-source cross-platform editing software Audacity. I use a Logitech G Snowball Ice microphone and Shure SRH 440 professional studio headphones. The theme music is from the song Without You, written by Brian Cremens and performed by the band 1000. This podcast is made possible by the fact that I work a full-time job, am happily married, and don't have any children. That's what really goes on behind the scenes of this artistic life.